Athletes and betting, the University of Iowa investigations are ongoing, and we will discuss right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everyone being here. Leave those comments and questions, as always, in the chat section, and we will talk Iowa football here for the next 60 minutes. We hope to get to Iowa football, but of course, this story is first and foremost. So we will discuss. We appreciate our guest here today, Tom Kakert, joining us from On3's Hawkeye Report. Of course, Corey Barta makes the show happen each and every week for us from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, thank you as always. Tom, thank you for being here as well.
Absolutely.
Tom, I guess let's start with just the base of this story. When you first found out about it, how you currently read the situation and the scope of it. We're seeing 26 athletes. We're seeing several sports. We're seeing at least reported from a number of outlets this investigation involving both Iowa and Iowa State, which makes sense because it is the Iowa Gaming Commission. So where do we stand in regards to the information you currently have?
Yeah, so this story really started percolating on Friday, early evening, late afternoon. The Iowa baseball team was going to be playing Ohio State. They had a golf outing earlier in the day, and Keaton Anthony, was at the golf outing for the University of Iowa baseball program. And then he wasn't in the lineup, and he's their best player. He's one of the best players in the Big Ten, one of the best hitters. He's second in the country in doubles this season in all of college baseball, and started kind of poking around, and he wasn't hurt, wasn't sick, didn't have a death in the family. It was just sort of this mystery, and then it started to kind of talk to some people, and Kyle Huseman, who covers baseball for us, was talking to some people too, and it eventually kind of winded around to something to do with sports gambling. And then it just kind of took off there. There were a couple of other prominent players from the baseball program that were also not in the dugout, not with the team, not playing, including two of their backup catchers. So that's how you find out about this. If not for the baseball team, I don't know if we even know that this is ongoing, honestly, because it would have been involved with, basketball, wrestling. Did people pay close enough attention to track to notice that a couple of people might be missing? I doubt it. I don't know. But with baseball, people notice, especially when it's your best hitter that's out of the lineup at a key point in the season. So it's kind of gone from there. Then yesterday, the acknowledgement from the Iowa Gaming Commission that there was an investigation into everything. And then about 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, the news dump comes from the university side. It was interesting that came from the university side, not the athletic department and not from Iowa Sports Information, but from the president's office, essentially, that 26 student athletes covering football, baseball, men's basketball, men's wrestling, men's track and field were involved. And overall, there were 111, but some of them are now former student athletes or were past student athletes that apparently have gotten flagged in this. So, and the university does do training on this with all the student athletes before the season every year. They're taught, you can't do this. And if you do this, there's going to be consequences for it. So now we're just waiting. From what we've been told with the baseball guys, they were hoping to hear today what sort of punishment they were going to be receiving, or because with the NCAA, generally it's been, you lose a half a year, you lose half your season. If you're, there's a kid from Virginia Tech that admitted to betting on NBA games, and he lost half a year in the past year. So is that going to be the standard from here on out? I don't know. We'll see. But I think we're going to know know more. I'll say this too. The coaches, other than like Rick Heller, the baseball coach, they had no idea. Even as of like last night, they have no idea which of their players or athletes are involved. Like football players, Kirk Ferentz didn't know as of last night. Basketball players, Fran McCaffrey did not know last night. Tom Brands doesn't know who the wrestlers or whoever's involved. They didn't know. That's as somebody told me this morning, who had spoken to at least one of the coaches. That's the first time in their coaching career that they've ever had experienced that, where they've been excluded from all of this.
And Tom, isn't it? First of all, thank you for being here, Tom.
Yeah.
But isn't it fair to say that that's due to the involvement of the FBI? I mean, if these are just routine NCAA violations that the NCAA is dealing with that would result in some form of punishment, like even what you said, a harsh half season suspension. I don't know how you exclude coaches. Isn't that an indication that there's something else besides just guys gambling on other sports?
Yes and no. I don't know that the FBI stuff is completely true. That nobody has confirmed that. All that we've gotten confirmed is that the Gaming Commission, and then there was some stuff with potential criminal activity, but I think the Gaming Commission has kind of indicated that when they're talking about that, it was some of the student athletes who are underage, who are not 21, who have been using these online gambling, and that's it's a misdemeanor, but it's quote unquote criminal activity, if you will, in air quotes. But for example, two of the baseball players that have been out are not 21. Two of them are freshmen. So that's maybe what they were talking about there. I know the FBI rumor has been out there, but I don't know that there's any evidence of that at this point.
Well, I guess I'm obviously inferring this based on the information, but the fact that all these coaches don't know, Tom, is just doesn't that raise a red flag? That, I mean, if this was just NCAA stuff, wouldn't the coaches know?
I don't know. This is new ground for us, so never had a gambling thing like this. So I don't know that they necessarily the names have been released, other than what's been out there with that they had to take the baseball players off the field because they were involved in it. So we know who they are. So I don't know why. I don't know why they had not contacted Kirk Ferentz or Fran McCaffrey or Tom Brands at that point, but and let them know maybe they're they want to finalize what their punishments are going to be or what the process is going to be like. I have no idea. It's very strange.
So if sorry to interrupt, Mark, but I was just going to jump in real quick. So I know some of this we're kind of speculating, Tom. So I want to make sure that we draw a line between speculation and what is confirmed. And again, we're kind of, the coaches don't know much. Certainly, we don't know anymore. When you look at the time that this broke in early May, if this happens if this news breaks in October, it's fair to say that it's very possible that there's a significant impact on football availability, at least during the investigation. And we don't know what's going to happen with football. Do you anticipate a big impact on football based on the information you have?
I don't at this point. But then again, I don't know who's involved from football, but I got an indication from a friend of mine who didn't know exactly, but they've kind of been told that they don't think it's going to be a big deal for football. But who knows? I mean, for a while, talking to some people 2 days ago, they didn't think football was involved because no one had contacted them about this. So they thought they were pretty much, free of this, and it was just going to be isolated to baseball. I mean, I know on the basketball side, they didn't think there was anything involving basketball because nobody had contacted them. So it's a murky situation. I do think that all of this, the genesis of all this probably was the situation with the Alabama head coach. And I don't know if we're even discussing this, if not for what happened with the Alabama coach and his friend who was betting in Ohio. I think maybe that, and I haven't talked to anybody at the Gaming Commission, but I'm going to bet, not bad, probably a bad word to use right now, but I'm going to guess that maybe they went through some of these things and checked on some of these things, student athlete wise, coaching wise, in their records. The Gaming Commission did after this Alabama thing happened to see if they have a problem or a potential problem within the state of Iowa. And that's where we get to today, because you sign up for one of these things. I mean, you have to give your social security number. You have to give your age. You have to do all these things. I mean, I've signed up for them. I have several of them on my phone. I use them regularly, especially during college football season. We talk about it on our podcast, all about gambling every weekend. So, I'm going to guess that's what happened, is that they kind of combed through their files and found all these different names and kind of said, okay, we got a problem here. Let's deal with it. Now, what I think might end up happening, guys, Iowa is one of the few states where you can bet on the in-state schools, where Drake, Iowa State, UNI, University of Iowa, you can bet on those schools in the state. I'm wondering if this is going to be like, so I live I'm right on the Mississippi River. So the other side of the river is Illinois. In the state of Illinois, you can't bet on an Illinois football game in the state of Illinois when you're in there. You can't bet on Northwestern or, a Western Illinois basketball game. So I'm wondering if Iowa is going to adopt a similar policy where they just take away betting on Iowa games. Now, we should mention that the Iowa Gaming Commission said there's no indication of issues with the integrity of the game with baseball or anything else. So they have made that clear that they didn't take down Iowa baseball games last weekend because they didn't think there was a problem there. Those games were up. They were live. You could bet on them on various apps last weekend against Ohio State.
And Tom, you went down the path that I was headed next, because, of course, the Alabama situation with the coach brought a lot of this to the forefront. But, of course, we're talking about a whole other level when the coach is involved.
Totally different thing.
Obviously, that is just obvious to everyone in regards to their involvement in the game, the strategy of the game, and their own game. And just to clarify for everyone, because you gave the example at Virginia Tech where, the thought out there is, of course, it's at a whole other level when it involves your own sport, your own level of sport, and, of course, your own participation. But this is something that is against NCAA rules for any athlete. And then the criminal portion of it would only apply to those that are underage, correct?
Yeah, that's kind of the indication that the Gaming Commission gave several folks in the media in the Des Moines area who spoke with their representative yesterday. So I think that might be it, but I don't know. Nobody knows because we haven't gotten a lot of facts. We got a pretty decent, I think, TikTok of May 2nd, this happened, May 3rd, this happened, May 4th, this happened. We got that development yesterday, but we don't have a lot of the details. And we don't know where it's going to go. We just know that Iowa has retained counsel, and we know that guys remain suspended. So at least on the baseball side, and they were hoping to find out today. Have not heard a thing one way or the other from those guys. I know they were hopeful. They were indicated to them that maybe they could find out if Keaton Anthony's done for the year or not, but as of right now, he doesn't know.
And last thing on this, Tom, and then we can let you slide, or if Mark's got something else for you. So if it is a result of, or partially in result to what happened at Alabama with the coach down there, one would think that if they're kind of scraping the grounds across the country. There are going to be more schools than just Iowa that this happens with. Now, we said that with the 2020 racial claims as well. We thought, okay, this is going to spark something across the country. We didn't really see that snowball effect. Would you be surprised if we don't see the snowball effect with this, and that Iowa's one of the only athletic departments that appears to have been, obviously Iowa State being another one, but that appears to be somewhat infected by a problem like this?
I would, but that's where I wonder about. But some of the things that I've heard are like, guys were betting on like NBA games. I mean, who cares really? I mean, a college kid betting on an NBA game. It's not like they were betting on it. None of this involves them betting on themselves or against themselves. There's no Pete Rose kind of thing going on here. So, I keep wondering though if some of this is just because of the fact that Iowa has Iowa games posted, and maybe that's going to deter some people. But I don't know. I don't know if any other state's done this, or if it was just the Iowa Gaming Commission seeing what happened in Ohio and said, "Hey, let's check our books. Let's make sure everything's clean here." I don't know if the Illinois folks did that. I don't know if they did that in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or New York or Maryland or any of the other states, Colorado, where gambling, Arizona as well, where gambling is legal in those states for sports gambling with online apps.
And just to make it clear, there's rumors out there that there were players betting on the Iowa-South Carolina women's basketball game.
Yeah.
Those rumors have not been validated, correct?
They have not. I've heard the same thing. Could that be true? Probably. Maybe, But then again, I'm just sort of like, what would the harm be? It's not like they were operating on inside information. I think what's happened, guys, is, these rules about gambling are kind of antiquated rules. They're set up at a time when Vegas was the only place you could go to maybe make a bet, probably, on a sporting event. And the only other way you could do it is you find a bookie, right? And so they were worried more about, well, you get in debt to a bookie, and then a bookie squeezes you and gets you to shave points, or throw a game, or then you worry about the integrity of the game getting impacted if some guy gets in debt to a bookie.
As happened in college basketball in the early 1950s.
Yeah, happened. The CCNY thing, I think, was right.
Yep.
And there was a Boston College when Dr. Tom Davis was there. At Boston College, you had the Arizona State thing with Headache Smith, where Arizona State students were taking bags of cash up to Vegas and betting on games because this guy was shaving points or throwing games. It's happened. And I think that's why they have these kind of harder rules. Now you can monitor it because they're all betting online. They're not going to bookies. They're going to, DraftKings, FanDuel, Circa, wherever, and placing their bets online. So you can track what they're doing. I would just set up something that says you can't bet on your school. You can't bet on the sport that you're involved in. But otherwise, if you want to bet any NBA games, NHL games, the Cubs-Cardinal game, you want to do that, go right ahead, as long as you're 21.
From a ethical standpoint, I completely agree with you, Tom. Unless the device itself or the platform can be configured in such a way to block that, though, those games are obviously the ones that those athletes participate in are just a click away. That would be my one concern in terms of having a habit or an addiction to do that, that there is a temptation because it's only a click away to go to your particular sport or game.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a temptation, but but they'll be able to monitor it. They monitor every bet that you make, and they have to report that. That's how you keep the integrity of things, and that's how they're able to operate now in the state. They have to report every bet, and you have access to it. So they can track it and say, well, if player X put a bet down on, the Iowa-Utah State game and he's playing in it, they can flag that right away and take it down, take the game down from betting, and sideline that player.
Tom Kakert, Hawkeye Report on 3. Tom, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate you providing some insight for us.
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure as always, Tom. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. Yes. Of course, my first thought when I saw that online was, okay, are these Iowa athletes? Because again, coming right off of the Alabama baseball incident that many of us who don't even follow college baseball heard about, read about. So nothing in that realm by any stretch. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, as Tom pointed out, at least no indication that anyone is betting on their own sport, their own team, anything like that. But more to be discovered, certainly. And there is a let's say, even if you agree with and have no moral or ethical issues with wagering on games, in my view, in my eye, there is something to being wise and being cautious. And when you give people that power and that ability to do that, and they're participating in sports that are on that platform, that app, then that provides, that opportunity of temptation.
Yeah. And, I've talked about, I personally don't bet, never will, on whether it's $1 or $1,000. I'll just never do it. But it's one of those things when you open up that door and make it easy for kids to get involved, you're going to have things like this happen. I would be surprised. I know, Tom, I think it's a fair point that we don't know if these other states are investigating their universities, but if they do, I think it's fair to say you're going to find a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I saw the question from belligerents in the chat. Should football be worried? When I first heard about this, individual that I talked to that's well connected to the program kind of echoed what Tom did. Not too concerned. It was a little bit of a red flag when I heard that Kirk Ferentz didn't know about this. I found that to be odd, especially when you think about the reports, the rumors that the FBI was involved or is involved, because then you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. Like, that's why I kind of pressed Tom on that is, well, wouldn't that be an explanation as to why the coaches aren't involved? Because we're dealing with the feds now. So hopefully that's not the case, because if we're dealing with the feds aren't coming in to look at underage gambling. Okay, they're not coming in to look at Keaton Anthony putting a few dollars on Iowa, South Carolina. So, that would be the concern. But I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot to this. But we needed to address this because I've had a couple people in the last 2 days, Mark, that have said, "Hey, you going to talk about this? What's going on here? Should we be concerned?" And I'm not a gambling guy. I'm not a betting guy. So it's hard for me. That's why I wanted to bring Tom on here, because he understands it a lot better than I do. He's connected to the scene, if you will. So I appreciate him coming on. And it's been, honestly, besides the disturbing news, and that news first broke for me Saturday. There were rumors going around on social media and on message boards Saturday. But over the past week, it's been a good week, man. I mean, we've had Bodie McCaslin commit, as you see in the title. We've had, we've had Will Nolan, another offensive lineman from the Chicago area, commit. And then we had, how about the one that we'll probably spend the most time talking about here in the next 30 minutes, Kaleb Brown, who, ironically enough, didn't we talk about him a week ago on this very show? Because he had just entered the portal. And I remember talking to you. I went back and listened to part of our show from last week, Mark. I remember saying to you, hey, this guy was recruited by Iowa. It's probably a pipe dream, but you never know. A week later, he's been committed for, 4 or 5 days? So I'm anxious to get your thoughts. He's a former Buckeye. I know he didn't see the field much at all. But Iowa fans, Mark, are pretty darn excited about the addition of Kaleb Brown to the wide receiving corps.
Well, before we get to that, and that should be the remainder of the program, because of obviously the immediacy of the news of all of those player transitions to the Iowa program. It's ironic that DraftKings did release its over-unders for this just here in the last few days, and they also released the point spreads for a number of future games, Iowa included in a lot of those, something we can discuss at any point in future weeks. Also,
Bizarre.
we, pardon me?
Bizarre.
Yes, a bit bizarre. And off the betting topic, we shared a post, you and I, in our DMs this week that, again, is a great topic for conversation, where the recruiting budgets of all the Big Ten schools in football were released, 1 through 14. And again, so that gears us up and arms us with a lot of great content over the next few weeks that we can get to in due time. But we got to get to these player acquisitions, and also I'm sure Iowa fans have been able to kind of create their own punchline there in regards to, who would be the last person who could be accused of point shaving in the state of Iowa. That would be the joke that I would throw out there.
Well, let me just say this, and I'm only going to say this with Tom on here, but there have already been people on social media that were just hoping and praying, Mark, that Brian Ferentz was part of this. I mean, think about that. When have you ever heard of a fan base just deeply desiring their offensive coordinator to be involved in illegal gambling? What a ridiculous story. But part of that is what has been built here. I will say this, Mark. Who was it in the media that I've told you this? You and I both lead very busy lives. I don't have time to read I used to read Iowa beat writer stuff all the time. Tom is a great beat writer. He's been around for over 2 decades. So check his stuff out over at HawkeyeReport.com. But I just don't have time to read a lot of people's content. But I did see somebody on the beat write. The headline was basically, "There's no more excuses for Brian Ferentz," and that's true. Like, I didn't think there were really excuses last year, because we could, I know that I know that there were excuses made about personnel, and my rebuttal to that is, look, you failed to develop these guys, you failed to evaluate, you failed to create depth, etc., recruit. But even if you want to somehow throw all your pearls at that argument, now you've got talent, and they've got a strong running back core. Mark, I think this is as strong as a tight end group as we've had under Brian Ferentz. And I say group, I'm not saying top, because I think it's hard to expect them to outdo Hawkinson and Fant from 2017, 2018. But, now you got a couple of receivers in Kaleb Brown, and assuming Seth Anderson can get healthy, Ragaini is going to be healthy. I'm not saying the wide receiver core is in great shape. I've said very plainly my feelings on the group. I think they need another guy out of the portal. I don't know that they'll get one, but injuries pending, not thinking about potential setbacks there. They're pretty good. They're good enough. They've got enough talent. There are no more excuses. Well, we don't have enough talent. They got some game break. I think Kaleb Brown's a potential game breaker. Caleb Johnson has proven. He was a freshman last year, played really well. He's going to be a year older. The offensive line has had another offseason to develop. They're continuing to, this summer will be big for them as well. So I guess my point is, I agree with that headline. It is, there aren't really any other valid excuses. Now, they may find one if the offense doesn't perform as they want. But I give Kirk credit for this. He has managed to evolve with the portal and land some big names. Cade McNamara is a big name, Mark. Eric All's a big name. Kaleb Brown, I know he didn't play a lot at Ohio State, but he is an Ohio State wide receiver, 4-star recruit from last class, and he had offers from Bama and Penn State and Ohio State and all the big names. So he's a big-time get, and you could make the argument, Mark, that he's the highest-rated wide receiver recruit in Kirk Ferentz's history, the history of him coaching at Iowa. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. Now, maybe it won't pan out, but with all the offensive issues they had last year, the fact that they made no change at offensive coordinator, the national punchline that was the Iowa offense, the fact that they were able to lure those 3 playmakers is pretty impressive. Whether it's because of the collective, and I think the collective, you have to give Brad Heinrichs and the Swarm collective some credit, but the coaching staff deserves credit as well. You know, how much percentage you give to the Swarm and to Kirk and to Tyler Barnes and to Brian, I don't know. But you've got to give credit where credit is due, and they are more talented at their skill position spots than they have been in a while.
The two reasons to be excited as an Iowa fan about Kaleb Brown would be, first and foremost, what Corey outlined about just the sheer talent coming out of high school and the evaluation. I'm going to go to three, actually. One would be just that. We're talking about a top 75 player in the nation, regardless of position. And Iowa typically, you know, we mentioned this, I believe, when you outlined Iowa's pursuit of Kaleb Brown last week. I kind of sized it up against Iowa's typical recruiting class, that they may get one player. That's probably the over under right there. Sorry to go to that term as well. But anyway, the over under on the one player per recruiting class that is of that standard, you know, a Caden Proctor, but top 75 player at his position overall coming out of high school, number one. Number two, yes, he has been lining up with Julian Fleming and Emeka Buka and Marvin Harrison Jr. and before that, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and just, you know, that type of being coached by Brian Hartline. So he's been in the best wide receiver room in the country since he stepped on campus, and that just has to be being pushed by and instructed by and mentored by, and being able to be in that kind of room has to, you know, heighten the skill set, iron sharpens iron, and all of that. And again, you ran down who was interested in him. And so that's another confirmation of how good he could be.
And just for the right, he was going to take a visit to Oklahoma. That's out there. And he was going to take a visit to an SEC school. Iowa convinced him to commit on the spot. And I know NIL had something to do with that. But regardless, they were able to convince him to commit on the spot. Well, not on the spot. It was, a day or two later. But the point is, everybody deserves credit. And you're right. I mean, it's unprecedented territory, not only for recruiting in general, but that position. And one thing I said to Brad Heinrichs, we had him on the live show on Friday, as I said, Brad, if there are two positions on this football team under Kirk Ferentz in the last 23, 24 years where Iowa has struggled to develop the most at, it's quarterback and wide receiver. And I know they're not real deep at receiver, don't get me wrong. But if you look at the biggest wins in the portal this offseason, they've been at quarterback and wide receiver. Kaleb Brown, Seth Anderson, specifically Kaleb Brown, because Seth Anderson's still largely unproven, completely unproven at Power 5 level. But then Cade McNamara, and sounds like Deacon Hill's had a nice, I mean, I think they've padded the room in general. I think their room is collect, not just McNamara. I think they probably are going to end up having more confidence in Deacon Hill backing up McNamara than they would have had with Padilla backing up Petrus. They've done good work at those positions. And, you know, injuries happen. Depth should be a concern. Play calling should be a concern. I did talk to somebody that has connections to Kaleb Brown's high school staff, and they said that Kaleb Brown's a really good kid, which is good to hear. He's very chill was the word that was used. So I think that was not said in a derogatory way, but it was to question, can he be an alpha male in that room? Because in a sense, I don't know that he needs to be the leader, like the vocal leader, but he's coming in with some expectation, because Iowa fans, this is not, we're going from the best wide receiving core in the Power 5 to one of the worst, Mark. I mean, that's just reality. That's what it is. One of the best offenses in recent time versus one of the worst. Maybe the best versus the worst. How crazy is that? So there are expectations on him, and those questions have yet to be answered. But and then as far as McCaslin, and Will Nolan, two solid wins. Both those guys had, they weren't being offered by the Bamas and the Penn States of the world. Nolan had offers from Indiana and Iowa State and Syracuse, Vanderbilt, that level of Power 5. And then Bodie McCaslin had Colorado, had Kansas State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Penn State, so he had a better crop. So they continue to do well in 24, and that class, I don't know where it ranks according to 247 Sports or to Rivals or On3. I think it's inside top 20, maybe even inside top 15 right now. They tend to, it seems like Iowa tends to build their class a little earlier than other programs, and so that does help them by sheer numbers. And last year, of course, they were dealt a blow when Caden Proctor decommitted just days before signing day. But, they've got a couple of prospects. They've got a kid who I think they've got a good chance of landing here very, very soon, who will be, even bigger than the two guys they just landed up front. So they're doing well, Mark. I'm a little bit surprised that we've talked about recruiting momentum over the past couple of seasons. I'm a little bit surprised Kirk's been able to do this at his age. Recruiting, it's not like you're bringing in top 10 classes, but now they're consistently bringing in top 25 classes, which they weren't doing that 5 years ago. That's tough to do, especially with the stigmas and the stereotypes out there about the offense. And yes, these are offensive linemen, but the O-line play hasn't been good recently. So kudos to the staff. They're recruiting well. They're using the transfer portal well. Question marks out there still, but if they can get past this gambling, this betting distraction, which I think they will, people are going to be pretty jacked for this season, Mark. And I guess that kind of brings us to the over-unders. What was your thought on the Iowa over-under when you first saw it?
So 7.5 is the number that I saw, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a 12-game over-under, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I think that's bizarre. I think it's bizarre. I mean, I'm not a betting guy. I'm not looking at it from that perspective, but just to say that that's where they're expected to be, somewhere between 7 and 8 wins. What does Vegas know that I don't, that you don't, that we don't?
They don't have any other information that we have. If we believe that college athletics is in the up and up, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, our previous conversation aside, that has nothing to do with this. Yes, everything's.
We've looked at the schedule. I mean, the schedule. We've talked about it almost be hard to not win at least 7 games.
I don't understand it myself. They would have to lose to, now, of course, every game is up for grabs, especially in the Big Ten.
Sure.
You can lose to anybody, but reasonably thinking, reasonably reviewing the schedule, and I'll pull it up here in a second, I think both of us were more in the 5 range in terms of losses if they lost to everybody conceivable that they could possibly lose to under reasonable circumstances.
Mark,
they would have to lose all those games.
I got ripped the other day by somebody because they thought I predicted that Iowa was going to lose to Nebraska, which I didn't. But they thought it was so insulting that I would even imply that Iowa might lose to Nebraska. They just lost to Nebraska last season, and that was at home. So that's possible. And that's one of the games I look at as a potential loss because we don't know we don't have no idea what that team's going to look like in late November.
I am pretty sure that they're going to be more capably coached, Nebraska.
They ought to be. I don't know. By the way, this is a random thought. Where did Casey Thompson end up? Like Florida Atlantic? Where did he go?
Well, I know that he was visiting Florida Atlantic. He hasn't landed anywhere to my knowledge yet.
Are you sure about that?
I look at that stuff all the time. Unless maybe I bypassed it because it was FAU and I'm not going to report on that myself. I'll give it another look. I know that he showed up there.
Okay.
For a visit.
I just asked that because I don't Tom Herman, that's the connection there. However,
yeah, okay.
Casey Thompson is a Power 5 quarterback, in my opinion, based on what we saw at Texas, based on what we saw at Nebraska. So, anyways, yeah, we've looked at this. I just, not saying they can't lose at Iowa State. That's going to be difficult, but what Iowa State was 4-8 last year. So they should have 3. They should be 3-0 by the time we hit September 23rd.
Penn State is the most likely game that they will lose for sure. But even that's not a.
We don't know what Drew Aller is going to look like. Everybody thinks he's going to be the next great thing. We don't know. I mean, it's a September game in his first season. You're pretty high.
We're going to come to the same conclusion, and that's that Iowa. There is only one team, I believe, on Iowa's schedule that is definitely better than they are, and that's Penn State.
Yeah, I don't know how you pick Purdue over Iowa. How do you do that? I mean, Purdue's had some good recruiting wins in the portal. They got a wide receiver from FAU that Iowa was looking at, but no, I mean, it's in Kinnick.
No,
with the turnover there and the loss of Jones and the loss of O'Connell. No, that's four. Those are 4 games right there that you say, yes, Iowa's more than likely winning. And honestly, Michigan State's in that boat. It's at home. Not saying they couldn't lose to Michigan State, but they should be, based on the schedule and based on changes at these different programs heading into mid-October. They should be 5-1.
Yes,
they should be.
They should be. You would be somewhat disappointed if they were 4-2 after these 6 games, correct?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because again, that means they lost to somebody they shouldn't lose to. They get Purdue and Michigan State both at home. And they get an Iowa State team that was 4-8 last season that lost Xavier Hutchinson.
So reasonably thinking, 4-2 at the worst at this point.
Very reasonably thinking, yes.
Now, of course, again, they could be 2-4, but
sure.
Reasonably 4-2. Okay.
Yep. And at Wisconsin, I'm fine with calling that a loss. I have question marks about Wisconsin, in first year under Luke Fickell, and that's it's not an early game, but it's, first half of the season game. Maybe Wisconsin will win, but I would not be shocked if Iowa goes on the road and wins that game. But I guess we can call that a loss for Wisconsin. I mean, they get Minnesota at home, so I guess we're calling that a loss. I'm trying to find a way to not get to 8 wins. Right? I mean, I guess Minnesota's a loss at home, even though they beat them like 9 years in a row and they're getting them in Kinnick.
But the same people that put together that over-under for Iowa put together an over-under of only 6.5 for a Minnesota team that's been much better than that. So they're not thinking much of Minnesota either.
So they're not losing they shouldn't be losing to Rutgers at home. Are they going to lose to Illinois at home? Maybe, but Illinois loses Tommy DeVito, and they look a lot different. And are they supposed to lose to Northwestern at Wrigley? Give me a break. There's going to be more Iowa fans at Wrigley Field than there will be Northwestern fans. That's a guarantee, Mark. Mark that down.
And again, these same people that are putting together that 7.5 number for Iowa put together 6 for Nebraska, 6.5 for Illinois, 6.5 for Minnesota. So it's not like they think highly of those teams either.
So they're what do they have at Rutgers?
That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head.
So Vegas is definitely, I know they're not doing this game by game. They're definitely thinking that Iowa is going to lose to Penn State and Michigan State. Is that fair?
Michigan State only 5.5.
So who's winning these games, Mark?
Yeah.
Anybody winning?
There has to be a mathematical compilation or computation in all of this. There has to be. They have to be looking at that, of course.
I'm assuming they have them losing at Iowa State then. I know I understand that's not how they're selecting these games, but they have to be thinking that there's a good chance Iowa goes on the road and loses at Iowa State because they're just the numbers aren't there.
I've got the Big Ten here. Give me just a second. So according to College Football News, how did I miss the Big Ten? Where are they? Big Ten. There they are. So on Iowa's schedule, Penn State 9.5, Wisconsin 8, Minnesota, according to this. So this from College Football News has Minnesota at 7.5, Illinois at 7, Michigan State, this one 6.5. Again, I saw 5.5. Nebraska at 6, Purdue at 6, Rutgers 4.5, Northwestern at 4.
Let me say something, Mark. Let me say something. All right. I think and I haven't said this for a while. I think there's a chance this team goes 12-0. I'm serious. I think there's a chance that happens. I'm not predicting it, but I haven't said that in a while. I don't think I've said that since you and I have been doing these shows. I think there's a chance they go 12-0. And I've talked about it. I know we're rehashing the same thing we rehashed last week, but it's fair because the roster has changed with Kaleb Johnson. You've got the points totals from Vegas. I would not be. Would you be shocked to see Iowa go out to Happy Valley and have a veteran-laden quarterback? A veteran quarterback in Cade McNamara go beat up on a first-year starter in Drew Aller. Would you be surprised if that happened? I wouldn't.
I'd be slightly surprised, but not by much.
Slightly surprised. Okay, slightly surprised.
Slightly surprised. I would guess that Penn State, because of Iowa's defense and special teams and the way they play, Penn State is not going to be some overwhelming favorite. You know, it's not going to be like, what was that point spread in Columbus? 30.5. You know, Penn State's going to be a touchdown favorite, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And they may win. They may win easily. Who knows? I'm not saying they definitely will. I'm just saying we have seen Kirk. They haven't done it in a while, but they have went on the road and beaten good Penn State teams there. I think back to 2010. Or excuse me, 2000. Yeah, 2009. I'm sorry, 2009. Adrian Claiborne block punt. So, I mean, I don't know. I just that over under number seems bizarre to me, and
I think they won there in 2008 as well.
No, that was at home.
Okay, Penn State was undefeated.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, they went to the Rose Bowl that year. Yep.
That was the Daniel Murray kick. So. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of buying in a little bit now, Mark, with the addition of Kaleb Brown. I'm not. Listen, I mean, I'll be accused of being a homer, and all the Michigan fans will come out of the woodworks to find.
They're not playing Michigan.
I know, but they'll. You know, here's what's weird, Mark. Let's think about this. I'm not saying it's going to work out the way they envision, but as bad as this offense is or has been, and as much of a need as they've had for an upgrade or upgrades across the board, and specifically those two big positions, what have they done? A school that has their reputation of going to the portal and targeting FCS guys and Division II guys and Group of Five guys. What have they done at those two positions? Not only have they went and gotten Power 5 guys, they've went and gotten Power 5 guys from Michigan and Ohio State. And I'm not including Austin Kutcher in that conversation. I promise I'm not including him in the conversation.
And Eric All has proven to be really good.
So is Cade McNamara.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm not saying we've talked about our different views on Cade McNamara. I'm not saying he's the second coming of Joe Montana, but he is a proven winner. And he's proven to be capable. I mean, he led the team to the college football playoff and a Big Ten championship. So, you know.
I would say right now he is am I missing anyone, third best quarterback in the conference?
When's the last time we were able to say that? When's the last time Iowa fans were able to say they had the third best quarterback in the Big Ten? Maybe with CJ, maybe in 2015 with CJ, his first season.
And I'll make a prediction that whoever starts for Ohio State will surpass him. So fourth, we'll go fourth.
Okay, so who do you have Tagovailoa somewhere, right?
Yes.
You have
JJ McCarthy.
You have JJ McCarthy. You have Aller or no?
No, I've got those two ahead of him.
Okay, and then you have whoever starts at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but they're not proven.
Now, are you high on Jeff Sims? Are you high on Gallic Manis? Are you high on?
Yes and yes. I didn't think I would be high on Jeff Sims, but he just beat out Casey Thompson, just forced him to move. And I know that when I talked to Zach Smith and had him on, he out of nowhere brought up Jeff Sims and said that he had all sorts of friends who said this was in January. This was like 3 days after Jeff Sims transferred. And we were discussing other things inside the Big Ten. And Zach Smith said, I have friends who are telling me that Jeff Sims is going to be the starting quarterback in Nebraska. He's going to beat out Casey Thompson. And I was like, whoa. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, his numbers weren't great at Georgia Tech.
No.
He ran the ball well, didn't throw a real high completion percentage. But
he was almost always playing with the inferior talent versus his opposition. He played on bad teams.
You would know more about Matt Rule's history than I would, but does he fit into the Matt Rule mold?
Well, Matt Rule made that decision. Matt Rule had He had mobile quarterbacks at Temple. He did not at Baylor. Charlie Brewer, his most successful quarterback, was, he was more mobile than Spencer Petras, but he wasn't a runner.
So am I. But that's, yeah. No, that's what I would have thought Casey Thompson would have fit more into, based on what I remember about role at Baylor. I would, but I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think that here's the thing about the Big Ten. You and I have talked about it. There have been years where they've been incredible. I think back to 2021, it was the year of the receiver. I mean, how many good receivers were in this conference that year? And just an incredible plethora of receivers. And then you had, the years of the quarterback. This year, I think you have, I don't know where, maybe it's the year of the defensive line. I'm just thinking about Iowa and a couple other universities that have strong units returning. But they got there are a lot of young quarterbacks in this conference. A lot of young, unproven quarterbacks in this conference. Whether we're talking about Jeff Sims, I know he's got experience at Georgia Tech, but he's totally new to the Nebraska system, to Lincoln, etc. Callie McManus, this is his first year starting the season as the starting quarterback. Drew Aller hasn't played. Ohio State guy hadn't played. Hudson Card hadn't played. I mean, it's you got new guy at Michigan State. It's just fascinating. And that's why I think with Cade McNamara, assuming guys stay healthy, there is not a here it sounds like I've become an employee of the University of Iowa. I don't think there's probably a better leader in this conference than Cade McNamara, based on everything I've heard and based on resume. There's not anybody that I would select in this conference and say, yes, I just based on leadership and attitude and charisma. There's nobody else in this conference that I would pick before Cade McNamara. Now, I'm not saying he's the most talented guy. I'm just saying from a leadership standpoint, he has grabbed everybody's respect in that locker room. And I find that interesting. It was one thing that Brad Heinrichs brought up on Friday as well. And I almost wanted to ask Brad, and I didn't do this because it's not fair to Spencer, but I almost wanted to ask Brad, does this mean that maybe Spencer Petras wasn't as strong of a leader as everybody made him out to be? Because that was what we kept hearing, was how Spencer Petras was just loved by his teammates, and he's the player's quarterback. And yet now Cade McNamara comes in, and we talk about how different it is, how much of a leader Cade McNamara is, and how he demands everybody's attention. It's like, well, why wasn't that happening before? So, the other part of this, Mark, and I brought up the Michigan-Ohio State thing, not only are those two blue bloods, two Power 5 programs that Iowa was taking players from, if you're talking about one university where you want to take a wide receiver specifically from, it's Ohio State. And if you're talking about one university where you probably want to take a quarterback from, maybe you wouldn't say Michigan. There's probably a few other schools you'd say first, but their head coach is Jim Harbaugh. So my point is, both of these guys, we've talked about this, both these guys have been coached up.
I'll amend your second statement to, who else in the country is taking a Power 5 conference championship winning quarterback from another school? Where is that happening anywhere else? It's not. That's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
it actually happened last year, but anyway.
Who?
Clemson's starting quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, left to go to Oregon State, but he was being replaced, much like Cade McNamara, I guess. But Cade McNamara is a better quarterback than he is.
And the Big Ten's a better conference than the ACC.
But the Big Ten is not a quarterback league right now. The quarterback play is not good.
It was a few years ago. It was a few years ago.
Yeah, right? It was a few years. It wasn't last year, and I don't expect it to necessarily be that great this year.
No, and the argument can be made that the Big Ten lost its 3 of its top 4 quarterbacks. Is that fair?
Stroud,
O'Connell,
Clifford,
O'Connell.
I thought Stroud and O'Connell were the 2 best quarterbacks.
Maybe you go 4 of the top 5. Is Peyton Thorne in the mix?
Yeah.
So
that's strange what happened there. What Mel Tucker did to screw that up, or I don't know.
That seems odd. And he's not even guaranteed to be the starter at Auburn, is he?
I would bet on it, but no, it's not guaranteed.
That's a weird situation. I agree with you. And that's why, again, Michigan State's on the schedule.
Yeah. They lost their quarterback, their 2-year starting quarterback, who led them to 11 wins and a Peach Bowl win and a top 10 finish 2 years ago, and their best wide receiver on the same day.
I'm just saying it seems to be falling in place for Iowa. That's what's weird. I mean, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sure.
Doesn't it? I mean, it seems to be falling in place. Now, it may backfire. It backfired in 2010 and it backfired in 2016 when there were a lot of expectations.
But to your point, Ohio State, Michigan come off the schedule. Penn State's on the schedule early. You catch the quarterback early.
Yep.
No Peyton Thorne, no Keon Coleman, the best wide receiver, and their starting quarterback gone from Michigan State.
They come to Kinnick. Mel Tucker's 0-1 against Iowa. They got killed in the last time those two teams played back in 2020. And then Rutgers is maybe they'll be decent. I thought they made strides last year. I mean, who is their quarterback? Do they even have a quarterback?
Gavin Wimsatt.
Wow.
Most likely their starter.
Wow. I'm just saying the schedule. You cannot imagine, you cannot dream up a better schedule in this conference. You can't. I think honestly, I might rather play Michigan State than I would Maryland.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Given that one position quarterback, that changes the dynamic completely.
Yeah, Maryland's pretty good. Yeah, it is interesting. And since these over-unders have been out for the last few days, and I've talked about them on the main channel and so forth, I did go back to my selections last year. And, Corey and I are not advising you to go out there and bet, but it sounds like both of us are kind of nudging that way, about 7.5 being low for Iowa. I made this statement. I looked it up. I'm sitting here last night taking calls and the over-unders were out there. So I was scurrying around looking for my video that I posted last year with my over-under recommendations. So I initially hit 3 out of 5. So that's good enough to be a winning margin. However, I added 3, and this was my thought. Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan were all 10.5. And I said, what you need to do is you need to take all 3 over, because at least 2 of those 3 are going to hit and you're in good shape. Now, what happened? 2 of them went 12-0. The other one went 11-1, hit all 3, 6 out of 8.
There you go. So you and I are in this in now, and the Minnesota one is bizarre to me as well. I mean, I know they lose Ibrahim, but they bring quite a bit back defensively, don't they?
Yeah,
that's an odd one as well, and they're playing in the West. I don't know what their schedule looks like. Maybe do they have Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule?
I don't know that. I would guess they've got one of them. Now, Minnesota does, for the first time in a long time, they go to North Carolina. They've got a big non-conference game.
Yes.
That's a toss-up. North Carolina is no, top 5 team or anything by any stretch.
And I'm talking about Kaleb Brown. He is my dark horse quarterback in the Big Ten this year. Mainly because I like to say Kaleb Brown.
I agree.
Just like some people like to say Tagovailoa. But
I like his head coach. He does a good job.
I know you do.
PJ Fleck's an outstanding coach.
Who was it the other day was it on my channel? I think it was on my channel, or maybe it was on Twitter. As soon as Kaleb Brown committed, there was already some Penn State fan somehow found my post on Twitter, not even following me. You're doing all this just to lose on the 17th in Happy Valley. It's like, okay. It's just amazing that people are, again, what have we talked about? Michigan, Penn State, those 2 fan bases. We already know the Nebraska fan base is in large part is somewhat delusional, but we have some Nebraska fans who join us on Tuesdays. We love them, but those 2 fan bases, Michigan and Penn State. So we traded off Michigan this year for Penn State. The last time that happened, we had the Kirk Ferentz quote about the fans smelling a rat. By the way, there were some rumors this weekend, and again, rumors, nothing confirmed. And as Tom Caker brought up earlier, no reason to think the Iowa Commission, whatever that is, they confirmed that there's no reason to believe that there's any betting on their own games. but there was a rumor about that 2021 Penn State Iowa game, which I thought was funny because if you go back to that game, remember all the injuries, the accusations of fake injuries lobbied against Penn State. So anyways, I just thought that was ironic that those rumors were started. And once you get to message boards, this story like this that's being kept under the rug or behind closed doors, whether it's because of somebody like the feds or certainly the NCAA, people are going to draw their own conclusions. So I guess it's good that what I'd say is it's good that we haven't. It's good that we don't have reason to believe that there's going to be big impact on football, not only because of this season, but because, boy, Kirk Ferentz don't need another scandal. If I know we've been critical of him, but that was my first thought when this news initially started to break. I thought, not only is this another possible scandal, but it's also another scandal on the watch of Gary Barta. And, I think the good news for Iowa, and this sounds bad, but the good news for Iowa is that Iowa State's under investigation for the same thing. That's the good news for Iowa and the good news for Gary Barta. Because if it was just Iowa, even if it is minor, if you got all these different programs, all these different teams within your department that all have students gambling, that tells me you as an AD have no oversight and no control of your program. And frankly, even if Iowa State is at fault, I think Gary Barta should probably be blamed for some of this. And maybe it's just because I'm looking for a convenient reason to blame Gary Barta because I don't really like the guy too much. But it's just whether we're talking about rhabdo or racial disparities or nepotism, with gambling. It's just one thing. Gender bias, lawsuits. It's just one thing after another.
But you're right about the Iowa State portion of this as well, because you can argue this from both sides. If you want to hold the athletic director completely responsible, they are responsible. But if you want to blame them, then and Iowa was the only school, then you would say, hey, these other schools have it buttoned up, and the other Power 5 school in the state is not being accused. But then if you want to play on the other end of the spectrum, it's, these coaches and athletic directors can only do so much. They can only lay out the rules. They can only present the information, give workshops, educate. They can't hold their hands.
And I think it's fair to say that Gary Barta does just that. He does only so much.
And it was such a positive last 15 or 20 minutes from Corey on the Iowa football program until the end.
Listen, I think most of the people, I don't know many people who think real highly of Gary Barta anymore. I mean, seriously, and I don't know him personally, but I'm just saying, as an AD, I don't know of really anybody that has a real high opinion of Gary Barta. I think Fran likes Gary to an extent. Gary hired Fran, so there's a bit of a conflict of interest there. But and I'm not saying any other coach. I'm not speaking for any of the other coaches, but you just wonder when does that clock run out? When does that his hourglass run out? So, anyways, this may be nothing, and like Tom said, it probably will be minimal. The impact it will have. It'll have an impact on baseball. It's already having an impact on baseball. A program that has a very slim margin as it relates to NCAA tournament odds. And we got the Big Ten tournament coming up later this month. But the sport that most people care about, and that's football, we'll wait and see. Look, what if they come out and say that I don't even want to name a name, but one of Iowa's starting cornerbacks, it's like two guys. One of Iowa's starting cornerbacks was involved in betting last year and has to sit out half the season. That is a big, big storyline. So it is possible. I mean, even if it's just, we say just gamble, if it's a misdemeanor and they're required by NCAA rule to sit out half a season and it's an impact player, it is a big story and it is a big deal. And there should be consequences, not just for the player, but for, I think, administration. I don't know that there will be, but let's just hope that doesn't happen, because they got, as we just outlined during the show, there are expectations are growing for this program, despite the fact of what happened 4 months ago with Kirk and Brian and that whole saga. Expectations have grown over the last few months, and let's just hope that it's not impacted by some ridiculous malfeasance with online gambling.
Folks, we've got a show that we're putting together here in the next few weeks. Don't know exactly when, TBD, but we will have Tony Altimore jump on here with a number of metrics involving 3 categories: the athletics department, the football program, and then also the university in regards to academics and culture and so forth. It's really fascinating, and it gives you a broad picture of each university. And we'll focus here, of course, on the University of Iowa. Gregory is encouraging everyone. Thank you, Gregory, to hit the like button on your way out. With a lot of people online here, we thank you for joining us. Corey and I do this each and every Tuesday, so come on back next Tuesday at 4:30 Central as we will talk more Hawkeyes football. From the Hawkeye of the Storm, what is going on over there these days?
Well, we've got, let's see, we just had Brad Heinrichs on Friday. We'll have another podcast dropping, I think, with one of the guys that we talked about today, I think. Recruit dropping here hopefully in the next week. And yeah, we'll continue there. I'm still behind. We've still got to recap some of these. I haven't even done a reaction on the 2 guys that we talked about today, McCaslin and Will Nolan. There's just been a plethora of news, which is good news. We've had some basketball news as well. So we'll continue to follow the portal. Recruiting is going in a solid direction. And obviously if there's any breaking news regarding the NCAA investigation into Iowa in regards to potential online betting, we'll break in, or we'll have a live Hawkeye hangout show. But yeah, plenty in the hopper for the channel.
We do have conference power rankings out on the main channel. We will dive into the Big Ten here in the next few days. Again, make it on back here next Tuesday. We have a great time talking Iowa football with all of you. Tuesdays at 4:30 Central. We will see you all next week.